Okay, we're going to continue with Siman Reish Samach Gimel, the last session on Sif Yud, and this is actually what we saved specifically for after Hanukkah, after we just finished them in Tuf Reish Ayin Aleph, after we learned the Gemara in Shabbos on Chav Beis and Beis, going on to Chav Gimel and Aleph. The Sugya of Hadlaka Oisem Mitzvah versus Hanacha Oisem Mitzvah. If the actual lighting is the mitzvah, that's what we already learned from Hanukkah and Siman Tuf Reish Ayin Hey over there. The Ramah concludes and says, "V'sorich lahaniach haneiros." Well, actually, let's go a little bit more up. The ikar hadlaka teluya b'nei rishim adlikin ala shulchan. The main lighting that we do is dependent upon the lighting that we do on the actual table. Alva loy b'shar hanei rishim abayis, but not by the other candles that we're going to be lighting in the house, other wicks, other oil. V'sorich lahaniach haneiros b'makoim shemadlikin loy lahadlik b'makom zel haniach b'makom acher. You need to place the candles you have to make sure that you're lighting them in a place where they are. You don't want to light it in this place and then put it in another place. In other words, we hold halakha oisem mitzvah, not hanacha oisem mitzvah. We don't hold the placing is the mitzvah, that you should pick them up and then place them down, and that's the mitzvah after they're lit. Rather, the actual lighting is the mitzvah, and therefore you want to make sure to light them in the actual place where they are going to remain stationary and they will not be moved. The question is, how could you move them after you light? So to that, the Mogan of Ram answers, maybe you made a condition not to accept Shabbos upon yourself, or it was a male that lit, who typically does not accept Shabbos upon himself when he lit, and therefore even though it's not a problem of muksa, it's not a problem of moving something on Shabbos, nevertheless, you shouldn't do it. It's a problem of adlakas neiros, of moving something in general. You should not be moving the candle for numerous reasons, and therefore, you should not move it. So that's the idea over here. This is the Ramah, relatively straightforward. Let's go straight to the Mishna Berura and see what the Mishna Berura himself comments on this specific halacha. The Mishnah Berura starts off a little slow, but he's going to pick it up over here. I'm just going to do a big zoom in to make it very easy to read this. Ve'ikar hadlaka in Memhei. Hainu the Yevarach aleihen v'lo yashar neris. You should make the bracha on the what you are lighting in the house itself and not on other candles. Excuse me, on the table itself where you're going to be eating. Because the main mitzvah preferably is on the candles that you are lighting, and you are going to and you're going to be eating by and benefit from the lights. And it's fitting that the bracha should fall on them. Even on one nair, one candle, one wick is enough to do. It should be pointed out, this is the major difference between Shabbos and Chanukah. On Chanukah, we're not supposed to benefit from the Norah, and it's prohibited to do so. On Shabbos, we should benefit from it. If there's a lot of women, and they all don't have their own individual table, they're able to make the bracha on the candles that are standing in the house in other places. Kagon, for example, al haneru shadolkin al benoidu hataluya beemso beemsa bayis. For example, let's say on the menorah that is, for example, on the for example, on the candles that are lit on the menorah that is hanging in the middle of the house, something like that. The kol and naktinim, we have a general rule. The kol makom shemadlik kedei, any place you're lighting in order, la so shamez attachment should do a certain usage there. Ikamishim shalom bayis v'alavarich. That is for the reasons of peace in the house, and therefore it's fitting that you should recite a bracha on that. Hanever shababayis hainu balabayis yachol lahadlik ala shulchan avarich alav. This is talking about the owner of the house. He's able to light on the table and make a bracha on that. Aval be'oreyach im yesh lo chedem yuchal ba'atzmo afilu inu olchol sham adlik sham ner mavarich alav v'kaniz kelel b'sivav. However, a guest, if he has a specific room for himself, even if he's not eating there, he could light over there a candle and make the bracha on that. Okay, like we just saw, meaning even if you make a condition explicitly, they're not going to accept Shabbos upon yourself until the candles are going to be on their place. Still, they should not be moved afterwards. Next, Mishna Berura, it's prohibited to light for Shabbos in a place where you're not allowed to light, where you're not going to benefit from it, you're not going to use it over there, and then pick it up and place it afterwards in a place where you will benefit from. Mishum, and here's the reason to kaim along, because we hold hadloko oisem mitzvah. The lighting is the mitzvah. The kevan shein the makom shein mishtamshim bo shein a makom chiyuvo ilo mahonli al the kosel kumach when yechachechech makom chiyuvo. And since you lit them in a place that you cannot use, that you're not going to use them over there, she'eino makom chiyuvo, it's not a place where you're obligated to light. Lo mahani, it won't help. I mean, reading lo mahani, it will not help. Hadakaso klum, his lighting won't help at all. Even if you're going to place them afterwards in a place where you're obligated, it won't help because you lit in a place where you're not obligated. So now it's not going to help if you're going to then pick it up and put it in a place where you are obligated. To the extent that you would need to extinguish and return and then relight it. Aval, however, if you lit the Ner Shabbos, if you lit the wick or candles that you're gonna use for Shabbos in a place that you do use, in a place that is an active location in the house where you're gonna be spending time in, so technically speaking, it's permissible for you to move them afterwards and bring them to another place in the house. Why? The kol habayis avimakoim, and the entire house is considered its place. Like there's an opinion that holds also in Chafayim and Beis in Brachos that there's an opinion that holds that the entire house is like 4 amos, and therefore you can walk anywhere in the house before you wash negavaser. The halavosh machmir hapazeh, but the lavosh is stringent with this and holds that no, even if you lit even if you lit for Shabbos in a place you're allowed to use, you should not put it in a place where you're not going to use it. You should not move it after. Says the Mishna Berura, in a place of great need, one could be lenient in this regard. And here it is. The Chai Adam writes that women who light in the sukkah on Yom Tov and then they move it afterwards into the house, it's not good what they're doing. The question is, why not? We have to analyze this, and does this apply nowadays? It might not be so simple that this, in fact, would apply nowadays. What is the reason for all of these halachas over here? Mishna Berura doesn't really say any of the reasons over here. So let's go in order over here. The Oz V'Hadar Mishna Berura has a few points over here, a few minor points, and we'll start with that. See what they add over here. First of all, this is an important point that gets quoted in a few places over here. The Kaf HaChaim and the Ksois HaShulchan Reb Chaim Noah say when the Ramah came along and said that it has to be al HaShulchan, the Ramah said you have to light. He said right over here, you have to light al HaShulchan on the table where you're going to be eating. Says the Kaf HaChaim, says the Chaim Noah, that doesn't mean it has to be actually on the table. It could be near the table. So that's a very important point. It should be pointed out that down here in the footnote they say the source of this Ramah is from a Mordechai, and the Mordechai compares this to the halachas of Chanukah. And Chanukah, we have a Gemara in Shabbos which we just learned a week ago. Chav Beis Hadlaka Oisem Mitzvah. This is where it comes from, and therefore that's why all this is very familiar, and we could just learn this very easily because we really understand all of this information, and we know that everything that we learned on Chanukah gets equally applied over here. Why does the Lavush hold? He's stringent and says that you cannot move it from a place where you should have lit to a place to a different place. So the Lavush comes along and says you can't move it in order that it will be nikar, in order that it will be recognizable that you lit in honor of Shabbos and not for something else. In other words, we want to make sure that it's recognizable that you lit over here for Shabbos and not just so that you could see better from the light that you lit from. However, in a place of need, you could be lenient, but preferably you shouldn't over here. That's the story over here. What's the story with the sukkah? Why can't you relocate it? Obviously, it's not talking about a case of muks over here. So it says over here in the footnote, if you're going to relocate it, it's gonna look like you were just lighting it for your personal usage, to the extent that even the Magen Avram would agree to the Lavush that it should not be moved, and therefore you shouldn't move it. The question becomes on this very relevant shaila, which comes up every single sukkah, because you want to light where you're eating. The question become, or you don't want to leave it outside, someone might steal it. So the question becomes, is it a muksa shaila? So they say it's not a muksa shaila because you could put something else on the base of where you're lighting, like a lighting tray over here. Here, for example, show you very quickly. For example, this. This is a lighting tray over here. So you could put what you're lighting on this tray. You put something else on the tray, which is not muksa. Then it comes out that the tray is a basis ladavar heter ve'isser. It's a base for something that's permissible and prohibited, and then you could move it if it has importance. You put a little challah on there, something. However, the question still begs to be asked, which is what about people are going to say that you're using it for your own need? So, first of all, we have to just define and categorize. This is specifically talking about when the candle is lit. You have the problem. This is not coming from a muksa perspective. From a muksa perspective, you could come on to what I just said and it wouldn't be a problem. So after it's lit, you could certainly bring it back in the house if you have something on there that has importance. However, the question becomes, while it's lit, could you bring it inside? So there's a very interesting idea that the Piskei Juvas relates over here. We're going to fly through this because we only have 4 minutes left before we get knocked out of the Zoom over here. He says, according to what we just said, nowadays that we have an amazing invention because of Edison called electricity, and it's recognizable that what we're lighting on Shabbos is only in honor of Shabbos. It's not so that we benefit from the light. One could therefore be more lenient, and even if that individual needs to relocate the lights, bring it back in the house. Why would you need to do that? Very simple. You don't have enough room in the sukkah. Small sukkah, big family, or just it's a small sukkah in general. So therefore, nowadays you could be more lenient. However, that's the idea, and this is why many nowadays are lenient to even relocate it if it's in the house, if it technically needs to be relocated from one room to another, and even if she already accepted Shabbos upon herself, someone could move it who didn't accept Shabbos. There's idea over here, the Shulchan Aruch, Magen Avraham, Mishna Berura, another place that you shouldn't move it unless you made a stipulation they're not going to accept Shabbos. Nevertheless, no one protested this, and there's what to be lenient on, there's what to rely on over here. There's a kind of argument in the Mishna Berura, as we'll see, and that's why many are lenient over here because it's only lit in honor of Shabbos. No one really uses it for actual lights over here, even from one house to another. Perhaps the Chayyim. What about the Chayyim that the Mishna Berura quoted? He said he doesn't like it when you move it from one place to another, and the stringency of the lavosh. Yeah, but. Nowadays, that wouldn't be as much of an issue, like we said, because no one's really benefiting from the light that you're lighting for Shabbos. We all have electricity, so that's the idea over here. Then he says also that the bracha should be recited on what you are going to light in the room where you are eating, preferably. The bracha should be on that. So if you're lighting it in an area and there's literally nothing there, some random corner, that could very well be a bracha in vain, as we discussed a little bit with the hotels over there, and you should actually, in fact, relight them. So that has to be something to contend with also. Also, another idea is you shouldn't light it when you're holding it. Of course, like we saw by Hanukkah, in a pressing situation, perhaps you could be lenient based on the fact that we said that we have electricity, and therefore perhaps you could be lenient. It's a problem really of muksa though. So unless you're lighting it earlier, I don't really see why anyone would ever do that. It doesn't seem so relevant to me. And then lastly, that that you should really leave it in the room where you're going to be eating. That's what we see from all of this, or at least two neighbors you should leave in that room. Any questions, comments on this relevant topic here?
No, for me, you just don't have a place. I mean, you don't have a place to put it down. You don't have it. To me, there's no clean. I don't know. I don't know when it would be actually no good.
Yeah, me either.
No. All right. Have a good Shabbos.
All right, everyone should have a wonderful Shabbos, and we
Anyway,
successfully finished Sif Yud, which is a tremendous accomplishment.
yeah, good Shabbos and Chodesh.
All right, good Shabbos and Chaydesh.
All right.